Throughout the history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most, that has made it possible for evil to triumph. It's better to give. Wise men have always known the deep and pervading truth that it is better to give than to receive. For even as it conflicts with selfish and ambitious desires, it moderates and controls them. Giving always demands sacrifice to overcome the temptation to enjoy mere daily comfort, to press resolutely and patiently forward on the scheduled way, or true test of the high degree of determination that should bind you together. Memories of past injustices should not divert us from the more pressing business at hand. We must live in peace with our former colonizers, shunning recrimination and bitterness and forswearing the luxury of vengeance and retaliation, lest the acid of hatred erode our souls and poison our hearts. Let us act as befits the dignity which we claim for ourselves as Africans, proud of our own special qualities, distinctions, and abilities. We must speak out on major issues courageously, openly, and honestly, and in blunt terms of right and wrong. If we yield to blandishments or threats, if we compromise when no honorable compromise is possible, our influence will be sadly diminished and our prestige woefully prejudiced and weakened. On this day, which men of earth and angels of heaven could neither have foreseen nor known, I give thanks unutterable by the mouth of man to the living God, who has enabled me to be present among you today. Today is the beginning of a new era in the history of Ethiopia. Since this is so, do not reward evil for evil. Do not commit any act of cruelty like those which the enemy has commanded against us. Do not allow the enemy any occasion to foul our good name. We shall take this weapon, his weapon, and make him return by the way he entered. We believe in cooperation and collaboration to promote the cause of international security, the equality of man, and the welfare of mankind. We believe in the peaceful settlement of all disputes without resorting to force. And in accordance with the character and the charter of OAU, we will strive to eradicate colonialism, racism, apartheid from the face of the earth, to frustrate the efforts being made by foreign powers to dictate the destiny of the African continent, and we will continue to stand.
Conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time.
It can get worse. Political violence in America is as American as apple pie and motherhood. Going way back to when the colonists came here from England, there has been political discourse and political violence. I'm going to give a brief history of political violence in the United States, and I'm going to start with the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. At the time, Aaron Burr was the sitting vice president of the United States, and Alexander Hamilton was the former secretary. Next, we move to Kansas, Nebraska. Kansas was referred to as Bloody Kansas. The term was coined by a person who had been on our panel in the past, Horace Greeley. And it meant the violence that occurred in this territory over the issue of slavery. Kansas wanted to be admitted to the Union as a state, and they were going to vote on that, and the pro-slavery and anti-slavery people battled to see what side would win in the Constitution. The pro-slavery people attacked Lawrence, Kansas, and killed 40 abolitionists or anti-slavery people. And in retaliation, John Brown beheaded 4 pro-slavery settlers. Next, we move to the United States Senate. Senator Charles Sumner, senator from Massachusetts, who was an abolitionist, made a strong anti-slavery speech on the floor of the United States Senate. In that speech, he accused Senator Butler of South Carolina of taking a mistress, the mistress being slavery. In retaliation for that, Preston Brooks, the representative of South Carolina, 3 days later, snuck up behind Charles Sumner in the Senate and beat him to a pulp with a cane. Next, we come to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Of course, everyone knows John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Lincoln. However, we know it was for political reasons. It was in retaliation for Lincoln winning the war and the Southerners being deprived of slavery. 2 other presidents were assassinated in the latter half of the 19th century. President Garfield was assassinated by an office holder who wanted a government job, and President McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist, certainly political assassinations. Later on, there were attempts at many presidents' life. I'll just mention 2. One was, of course, President Truman by Puerto Rican nationals in the Blair House when the White House was being renovated. And of course, there was an attack 4 years later in the House of Representatives. 4 Puerto Rican nationals were able to gain admittance to the House of Representatives seated in the ladies' balcony, and they fired randomly at the House of Representatives, wounding 5 members of the House who were, ironically, debating immigration. We also have the assassination attempts on President Franklin Roosevelt in Miami, in which the mayor of Chicago was killed. And we also have, of course, the assassination of John Kennedy. So as we reach today with the wounding of Representative Scalise, what we have to do is dial back the violence. We can have political discourse without resorting to guns, without resorting to bombs.
Good evening, and welcome to Conversations Across Time. Seated opposite me is Irv Madnick, and Irv Madnick has played many characters on this show. And Irv Madnick is a trial attorney, and you're going to see that come across. So Irv, again, I look forward to defense counsel being at this table. Thank you for being here, Irv.
Defend you anytime.
Thank you so much,
you.
and I probably need it.
Okay.
Seated next to Irv is the show historian, Mark Hoffman. Now, Mark Hoffman, you've known over the years because Mark Hoffman has been so many different characters, and he always plays them with pizzazz, and he is the show historian. In addition to being an actor, he's the show historian. He keeps us on the straight and narrow. And of course, as a retired history teacher, history is very important to him, so he wants to make certain that we get it right. So, Mark, thank you for being here once again.
Great to be back.
Thank you. Now, the only character that we have tonight, our historical reference, is the Emperor Hailee Salassie. And thank you so much for being here. And Emperor Salassie was the emperor of Ethiopia from 1930 to 1974. And one of the things that is so well known about the emperor is that he had a very strong moral compass. So we've invited him here because we want to have a discussion about events that are happening, current events that are just very troubling to us. And it would be helpful to have a moral leader present. So if you remember last week, we just touched a little bit, and I believe, Irv, you were making a statement when we broke last week concerning the fact that people are concerned about their lifestyle, the differences,
Right.
cultural differences.
That's what the Trump movement, was really all about these people that were really dissatisfied with their station in life at the present time as a result. Take the coal miners, for instance.
Yes.
They're not mining coal anymore because natural gas is much cheaper and coal isn't a clean energy source. So these people were all out of work. All the manufacturing workers in this country, people that put the cars together and people that manufactured everything, the garment industry, for instance, none of those people are working in factories. And it's not that we're not producing things, because we're probably producing more things today than we ever did, but people aren't producing them. robots, computers. So their complaints are legitimate, and they're just as legitimate as they were back in the early 1900s when we moved from an agrarian economy where most folks didn't live in the city, but most folks lived out in the country, worked on the farms and worked for the farms. And when the Industrial Revolution came around, which made it more...
Changed the economy.
Absolutely, changed the economy tremendously. People moved from that circumstance and had to move into the city to work in the factories, to produce the products that made this country viable.
Now, I want to stop you right there because it's an interesting thing. And Mark, I know that's where you're coming from. Because that was the beginning. The business leaders in this country got together and said, if we're taking people from the farms and they're moving into these urban centers and we're having factories and there's an industrial revolution, we need to retrain all of these agrarian workers so that they can work in the factories. And what came out of that? Public education.
Education, apprenticeships,
Yes.
in all of the trades, and education.
Yes.
Education was the thing that bridged the gap between the agrarian society and the industrial
But it
revolution.
wasn't, in the beginning, it wasn't academic education. The elite.
It was vocational
the-
education,
the
or whatever,
elite had
whatever
their-
education was needed.
Right, and that,
Today, by the way, I know Trump screamed about getting jobs and more jobs and jobs. There's plenty of jobs. There's 5 or 6 million jobs out there.
They don't have the population
They
to
can't
fill them.
find people to fill the jobs because they're not qualified to do so.
But that's the
I
obligation.
like to add to what
Yes.
Irv said about the cultural difference, and it's economic, sure, and they're losing their jobs, but they also feel threatened by changes in the culture and environment. For example, Trump voters and even the women are threatened by the change in which minorities and women are treated as equals. I mean, if you look at it, the TV show Mad Men, there's people to Trump. That's the kind of country
They
I
want to
want.
revert back to 1955.
1950, Eisenhower, Levittown and Lily White, and they feel threatened by the change. And the change is, women's rights and women having a say. The change is seeing a person of a different color, of a different religion, running the store. I mean, I don't know how many jokes I've heard from people about, who runs 7-Eleven and who runs the motel, and they feel threatened, just like the Southerners who owned slaves and the people in the South who didn't own slaves felt threatened, not because they said, oh, slavery's great or not. It's our way of life, and you're taking our way of life away from us when you do these things. And people who are threatened and feel that everything they work for, everything they believed in is being ridiculed and taken away from them, they really get angry about that. And I feel that's part of the rebellion. I mean, when Trump, and it's crazy to say, they thought it was going to be his downfall when he talked about grabbing.
Oh, yes.
Right? They thought.
When he talked about grabbing women by their
Thank
personal
you. I didn't know
private
how
parts.
to put it, Vivienne.
And that was it, private part.
Right. And you thought it was going to be his downfall. Who could say that? There are men that said, I like that he said that. And they voted for
Women
him.
said that.
Wait a minute.
Women said it.
Right, exactly.
Did you see the T-shirt
Yeah, I did
that a
see
woman
it.
was wearing
It had
at a
an
Trump?
arrow.
So-
Yeah, and had it, grab my, with an arrow.
So-
A
so-
woman was wearing
So
it.
when Irv said
Political correctness. That was
it's cultural, it's economic, culturally, they're losing their jobs, and it's how they view society. The man being a strong, macho man, and I looked at the results of the Trump election, and in terms of like some of the people that you thought wouldn't vote for, like Latino men, voted
Machismo.
right,
Right.
voted for Trump because
Because of machismo, right?
exactly.
Male dominance.
Male
in
dominant.
society.
I think Trump, that this is their last stand, their
There's,
Alamo.
there's no way that we're ever going to be able to go back to madness.
Right. This is their
There's just
Alamo.
no way,
Right.
because globalization is here.
I agree
and
with
it's,
you.
and it's fostered by all of the technical achievements that have come around in the last 30 and 40
I
years.
agree with you 100%, but this is their last stand.
We understand what they're...
This is their Alamo,
And
and,
they have-
they're willing to fight.
And they're willing to die.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not
And it's
saying
just-
that.
well,
I'm not saying that they're willing to die for it, because
If the
I don't think they're going to take up arms because
If
they
the-
can't work at the GM plant anymore because there's robots there. I don't think so. We can talk about Trump all we want, I mean, but it's obvious after how many months, 6, 7 months he's been, it was obvious during the campaign to me, and it must have been obvious to a lot of other people too. This guy doesn't know the first thing what he's talking about. He doesn't read. History doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't know what the Constitution is. He doesn't know
But he has
the
powers.
constraint. He doesn't know the
con-
constraints of his
construction.
office. He doesn't know anything about separation of powers.
Right.
He doesn't. He thinks that he's going to be like a bad Hailee Selassie, not a good Hailee Selassie, but a bad Hailee.
An emperor.
Hailee Salassie, and I'll ask him. He dealt with someone similar to Trump. He
Well,
dealt
sure.
with Mussolini.
Absolutely,
That's-
there've been people like that, Hitler, and Mussolini.
And didn't you criticize Mussolini for the use of chemical weapons?
Absolutely, but it was also premised upon greed and hostilities of humankind at the same time. Benito Mussolini was a representative of a way of thinking that France and Great Britain were complicit as well in trying to maintain an alliance with him and the League of Nations at the same time, and denying Ethiopia a sense of protection under those kinds of circumstances. But mustard gas is just a symbol of how man's inhumanity to man can go. We have situations with nuclear disarmament now within the world that is going to proliferate or exacerbate our process of denying human beings.
Well, I wish you were around today to eloquently speak out against Trump use of phosphorus bombs.
Yes.
Well, yeah,
In Syria.
people don't know what's going on under their noses because they are being misled and distracted with smaller things. No one's mentioned Vice President Mike Pence, who sits in the shadowed recesses of wherever the halls of injustice are, just biting his nails and saying, "Hurry up, get rid of this guy," so we could get this thing on the
So
road.
no, I want to make sure we understand it. So you from your perch, you're looking at this and saying that the vice president and perhaps the GOP leadership have Trump in place to get whatever they can get,
There's no question about
and
that.
then but they want him gone.
He's
They're going to want him
he's
gone.
Very
And-
necessary. He's very necessary to play out the role of the palace drama,
Okay.
being in place to be the one to present what seems to be the platform, but at the same time, as long as he will rubber stamp their legislation, he's very, very powerful.
He's going to listen. He's going to stamp everything that they approve, because that's his way of staying in where
power.
he is in place. These are intelligent people, by the way. I mean, you can boo-hoo these Republicans all you want, the caucus, Freedom
no.
Caucus, and the other one. They're intelligent people. Most of them are lawyers. They're business people. They've been
That's
elected
an
to Congress.
oxymoron, isn't it?
No, that's for sure. But the point is, they are intelligent people.
Over the years that we've been doing this show, we've had this conversation. Slavery was not an institution that helped the average white person living in the South, because the jobs that the slaves were doing for free were jobs that could have gone to the poor working class in the South. Yet you get a working class person who doesn't own a slave, doesn't have any vested interest in protecting the institution of slavery, and he puts on a gray uniform and goes out and shoots other people
Why?
to protect
Yeah.
the interests of the wealthy, which is precisely what we are seeing
But it's
now.
his way of
And
life.
that's what's
Vote-
happening now. These people
Exactly.
vote against their own interests.
Right, but he
Exactly.
would.
Why? I still don't understand
That
why.
white
I don't
Southerner-
understand the gray uniform
but it
why,
goes-
and I don't understand
goes back
today
to the
why.
cultural thing. That poor white Southerner was defending a way of life, the chivalry of the man and woman, the woman's place being in the background. He was defending a way. He wasn't defending slavery. Slavery was part of his way of life, and he felt if slavery ended, it had nothing to do with economics from his point of view. 'Cause
But
if
it
he-
really did have a lot to do with economics.
No, I'm
because
saying
the
from his
South-
point of
But-
view,
but he
if
didn't see it.
if
He
he
didn't
thought
understand
right,
it.
if he thought about it, he wouldn't have fought. But
Just
he
like
said,
these people that voted for Trump.
exactly. They didn't fight their own self-interest. They voted to preserve a way of life that they perceived was slipping away from them, and that's what the white Southerner,
The same thing.
the working class white Southerner, and the thing is, like, there's debates in history and historians. Could the Civil War have been prevented? Could we have compromised? When the rhetoric gets that revved up,
Yes.
as it's starting to do here, and we're getting back to the theme, it could get worse. it's pretty tough as things start to move this way. It's harder and harder to bring them back into the middle, and that's what I'm afraid is going to happen.
Well, it's definitely going to be hard to bring people back in the
Right,
middle, but that's something that's going to happen, and I believe that it will happen. I believe that this period in our history it's
A
really
blip?
an aberration,
Yeah.
Okay.
and it'll pass. I mean, I've lived, and most
Yes.
of us have lived in much worse times, with much more turmoil. We lived through the 50s and 60s, where a president was assassinated, where a leader of a movement, an amazing movement, was assassinated,
several of them.
where a presidential candidate was assassinated, where people were rioting in the streets, where we went to war, and we've already discussed this many times on this show, went to war over a mistake, a stupid reason, and hundreds of thousands of Americans were killed.
Yes.
I mean, and a president was impeached.
But
And we went through that, and we came out on the other side, and we continued to prosper in this country. And now we're coming through another period of our existence
Right.
that has problems that are created by the natural ways of the world with more technology, and the economic situation changes for a lot of people. And it's going to take some time to bridge that gap like it did during the Industrial Revolution. But eventually, we're going to come out on the other end.
yeah, but when
and
you
things
drive
hopefully will
when you
be better.
drive 110 miles an hour on a mountain road and go around the curves, you might survive one trip, you might survive 2 trips, you might even survive 3 and 4 trips, but eventually you're going to crash, and we can't.
Well, a
keep,
smart person's not going to do that. Smart person's not going to do it
Yeah, but
twice, and then it's going to
yeah,
do it
but
up.
we've been doing. That's the whole point.
Well, that's why education is the key here.
That-
We've been
And
talking
wait a
about
minute.
it over and
We-
over and over
but we
again.
talk-
We have the Civil War.
Yes.
We have the Red Scare. We have McCarthyism. We have the
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That
We
was
have-
fun too.
That was
man.
a little- that was fun.
We have the Vietnamese War and the protests, and a lot of this stuff stemmed from that. And both sides were polarized. You know, they didn't call them the alt-right then; they called them hard hats then, and they called them hippies instead
Yes.
of the left. But it was the same philosophical differences. And you're right; we got through it and we grew. But once in history, every country doesn't survive all the time. The Romans invaded a lot of countries. The Romans did a lot of things. They rolled the dice and they always survived, but eventually they collapsed too. So you can't keep taking the chances, and we're supposed to evolve. We're supposed to get better. We're not supposed to be doing what we
But
did
we
before.
have evolved, and we have gotten better.
No, we haven't.
And we've
I-
always,
I-
there's always
I-
been blips. You can say whatever you want.
I don't agree with you,
You
Bob.
don't think
because-
so?
No.
Gentlemen,
Why?
Empress Selassie, I want to hear what. I want to
Okay.
hear what.
gentlemen,
Yeah. What,
we are bantering endlessly, I think purposefully. We are not the ones who are coming. We are not the ones to follow. We are here as the we now. We in 50 years will be different. The composition of what we call we
Okay.
and us is going to be different. So let's look at education as a matter of preparing the future. The ones who are coming after us are being informed through different mechanisms for manufacturing, surviving, and innovating. They don't care to read about history as such as they do to become more efficient in technology.
so let me ask this question, because we've talked about the topic of from moving from an agrarian to an industrial society, that there was training, that there were business people who realized that it was important to educate the workforce. Okay, I don't see that happening now.
Right. To train, there's no
To
force.
train, there's 5 million jobs that you talked about earlier that are going wanting. I don't see any program, and you know, the fish rots from the head down. I don't see any idea about retraining a workforce to take the jobs that exist. Instead, we have 45 who campaigned on the fact that he was going to bring back jobs from the coal industry. Now, you and I, everybody at this
But
table knows that couldn't
intelligent
happen.
people who would have been educated would know that. Would know that
Yes.
you're not going to bring back those jobs.
Yes.
Would know that we live in a global atmosphere.
Yeah, but-
would know that you're never going to have coal again as a viable product. They would know those things if they were
You
educated.
brought up the Industrial Revolution, and one of the things that got us through that transition and the cultural and economic transition was the transition of public education
Yes.
and training people. Now you have a president, you have a...
He's anti-ethical to that. He
well,
nominated
well,
somebody to
right, exactly.
To
he has-
destroy
to the
public
education
education.
department's against public education. We know that.
The
Yes.
But it's going to go so far in that direction that there's going to have to be a spring back either all the way
Yeah,
to
but
the
we're
other
talking
side or
about-
hopefully to the middle.
So now you
And
have.
that's what I think is
You
gonna
have
happen.
her, Betsy DeVos, advocating charter schools and no regulation, which means they can have any curriculum they want. It means there's no balanced curriculum. If they want to teach, not each other,
Creationism
or whatever,
creationism
yeah,
and not intelligent design, whatever they call it, instead of evolution, they can do it. If they don't want to have vocational education, they can do it.
Education isn't just one thing.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
it isn't just
right,
teaching one
exactly,
thing.
exactly.
It has to evolve
But
with the society.
you have a
It has to-
president-
and has to be
Has to
representative
reflect.
of what people have to
Who
know.
did he just appoint on his education commission? I think it was Jerry Falwell. He just put him on an education commission now.
Seriously, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I'm not on, in it, but as a consultant on the
Yes, yes,
educational commission. So what are we going to? So, I mean, to me, what they're trying to do is not educate the people, to keep them uneducated and
Well,
untrained.
That's what a
Indoctrination.
despot does. He keeps the
Right.
keeps the people.
And we've talked on this
Under
show
his thumb.
about that. We've talked on how tyranny succeeds. And what is one of the first things they go after? They go after the media. They
Oh,
go
absolutely.
after education.
Shut the media down.
Shut
That's
the
exactly
media down. Shut
He's doing
education.
all of the things that you would
That's right.
expect some authoritarian
Yeah.
despot to do.
Let me
Exactly.
ask
And that's
that-
why I think he's gone so far, and it's so ridiculous. And listen, there is a chance, although I don't think it's going to happen if the Republicans are in power, that he would be impeached as a result of all these stupid things that he's doing. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to, the way you create
Impeachment's
change, of
not
course,
going
and
to
we talked about
Yes.
it a million times, you're going to have to vote, and vote the way you want to
Right.
get whoever is in power out of there and put in the people that you think can do a better job. And hopefully the person you put in there can do a better job. We don't know that for a fact.
Let me ask that.
I mean, I thought Obama was a tremendous guy. I
Yes.
thought he was as smart as anybody I knew who was president of the United States. He wanted to do the right thing over and over and over again, and yet he couldn't. And the problem that we have today, and I hate to say this because I love the guy, is really because he was the president of the United States for 8 years.
Wait a minute. Let me say
All
this.
of that
Irv, I
undercurrent of-
agree. All
okay.
of this, the reason that we have a Donald Trump is because
of
we
Obama.
had a Barack Obama.
Absolutely.
No, you have to say one other thing, not
Yes.
because you have Barack Obama, because Barack Obama
Was
black.
African American.
But for most of the people
But
and
that
most
was
of the
the premise.
population.
That was the premise of this noble experiment. That was the whole premise of the Constitution and how this government was set up. Separation of powers, representative government. I mean, that was the whole
And
notion.
still, we made a lot of mistakes over time.
Yes, yes, we
Vietnam,
made-
Iraq, McCarthyism, on and on and on. But here we are. We
Yes.
have the ability to say whatever we want to say. We're doing it right here in front
Yes.
of people, and people can watch it. They can agree with us or not agree with us without killing us,
Yes.
without us killing everybody else. We can live better than we ever lived before with all the modern conveniences that we had and the technological advances. We have to be able to go back to the beginning and learn how to compromise, to learn how to live together, no matter the fact that we're different, that we believe in a different God or
That's the
believe
beauty
in
of that's the beauty of what this country is supposed to
But
be. That
besides-
there is
it is, and that's
But-
the
but
ideal,
this-
and that's what you have to continue to strive for, and it's
Yeah,
very,
but
very
beside-
difficult
but
because of all
beside-
these things.
Besides
So to
education,
come up with
you need
a
a leader that
you need
a leader
You
that
need to look at this thing. This leader's awful. Let's agree with
What-
that.
but so he feeds
he's
into
only
the-
here for a short period of time. He's not going to be here forever, like Hailee Salassie. He was a good guy,
Right.
but he's not going to be here. He's not a monarch, so he's only going to be here for a short period of time. We have to go on from that and continue with the ideal. Not look at the glass, and we talked about this before. It's half empty, but look at the glass as half full.
One question.
And that's what I think is most important.
One
Yes.
question. How can this be Camelot when in 48 hours, 48 people are shot?
yeah,
It's incredibly
how-
horrible.
how
That's
can
a horrible
this-
thing.
Yes.
yeah.
But that's one of the things that we have to overcome down the road. Otherwise, it's going to become worse and worse and worse. There are things in this society, like the gun situation is awful. I mean, and to have these kids have guns who are really 14 and 15 years old that have no value for life.
That's only a symbol. The gun is a symbol of the people's lack of control.
Absolutely.
For the
I agree
purpose
with
of the gun. The gun is
I
not
agree with
shooting
that.
anybody.
Absolutely.
And
That's
it goes to the
right.
conditions that they live in and they shouldn't be living in a country that has all of this wealth.
Next week, come back because we will be taking up this very same conversation across time. And I'm going to ask my guests to come back. There are so many things that we need to get to, and we're just getting there. So this has been Conversations Across Time. Please tune in next week so that you can see the third part of this very interesting debate. Thanks much.
Conversations across time, 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 conversations.